Hello and welcome to Gore and Grapes, where I review horror films and enjoy a glass of wine while I tingle your spine. I'm your host, Carla, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 2. Hi, everybody. Welcome back. I have been away for some time, and all of this was not planned, as some of you have already been made aware of. I had made a post a little bit ago, a couple weeks ago, about some life changes. And for those that know, they know. And it wasn't planned overall. This all just kind of happened. And long story short, I was offered a position that just essentially fell on my lap. And then at the same time, I had decided to go for elective surgery, basically. And so all of that is fine, but I had been maneuvering the transition out of the old job into the new one while also recovering from surgery. So it's been a couple wild weeks, but I'm here now, and that's what matters. And I would also like to take this opportunity to say thank you to everybody for their patience, their cooperation for or during all of this. And so I'm very thankful that you've stuck around. Thank you. I also want to say that because of this elective surgery thing, I was unable to drink alcohol for some time, and I am probably okay to do so now, but I will choose not to for a little bit just to make sure that everything is okay. So I will not be drinking alcohol or wine today. However, I was suggested to drink some alcohol-free wine. And so apparently, from what I've learned, is that this is all marketed as alcohol removed wine more than alcohol free wine. I guess the technicality is that there's less than 0.5% ABV in these bottles. And so legally, they're considered to be alcohol free or alcohol removed, but they do contain a little bit. I figured that for today's episode, and perhaps for a couple other ones, I will be drinking alcohol removed wine. And I've tried my best to look for a Spanish red wine. I was unable to find one because I am quite limited in my options, but I was able to find a New Zealand alcohol-free wine. And so the one that I have is called Giesen, and it is de-alcoholized New Zealand premium red, which is crazy. There was nothing in the back about, the wine in particular or anything behind the brand or the company or anything whatsoever. So it's fine. We're going to be fine. But this is the first alcohol removed wine that this podcast has presented, and also the first New Zealand wine, which is great. So lots of new things here, and we're going to keep celebrating. So anyways, without further ado, cheers. It's straight up grape juice, but it's really good. Super light. It's light on the palate. It's looks dark on camera, but when you hold it up, it's quite light. I like it. It's quite sweet. It's not overbearing either. It's quite moderate. I highly recommend it. It's a 10 out of 10. Without further ado, I would like to talk about Atrocious, which is a found footage horror film from Spain that was released in 2010. As I have stated, this movie is from Spain, and so it has seen its first or its debut in Sitges at the Sitges Film Festival, where ironically the film is also based in. It was released on October 15th, 2010, and saw its US release on August 17, 2011. I do also briefly want to say that this film is quite, without giving away too much, this was a film that I watched while I was in college as well. This was like one of the few in that, batch of movies that I watched while I was in college, as I keep talking about. I'm sure you're all tired of hearing it, but it was a movie that I found during that time. And so it does hold a special place in my heart, but Now looking back and dissecting it a little bit, I do have a couple of things that I'd like to say. This was, I believe that this had to be maybe among the first of the found footage films that I've seen. But anyways, I won't say too much about how I feel about it. Y'all already know. But for those of you who don't know, what Atrocious is about. Atrocious is about two siblings, Christian and Julie, who are paranormal investigators who host their own web show, go on a family trip to their vacation home in Sitges for Easter weekend. While away, they learn of the legend of a girl named Melinda who had disappeared in the labyrinth conveniently situated in their vacation home's property. And so they take this opportunity to investigate the legend of Melinda until things go seriously awry. Like I said, this film had its release in Sitges on October 15, 2010, and Atrocious also happens to be a part of the Bloody Disgusting Selects line, which also famously features Terrifier 2 and 3, which I won't get into. We can probably talk about that another time, but I was pleasantly surprised to see that it made it on the Bloody Disgusting's Selects film line. This was directed by Fernando Barreda Luna. Atrocious just happens to be Fernando Barreda Luna's film debut as a director. And there's really not much known about him other than he is Mexican, which I thought was kind of strange for a Spanish horror film. You know, all Spanish cast and everything, whatever. But that's just me. And he is allegedly from Tamaulipas, Mexico. According to his LinkedIn account, he is also a producer for Nopal Army Films, which is a production company based in Mexico City. And he also previously worked for Nabu Films, based in the Monterrey area. He has an Instagram account, but it is private, so we will respect his privacy, but no other social media that I can find. It does appear that he keeps a low profile, but he does maintain or remains active in his work as a director. After Atrocious, he went on to produce 21 Days, 2014, La Posesión de Altair, 2016, Se Busca Papá, 2020, and Amores Incompletos, 2023, with only the former two being horror films. I couldn't find any interviews with Barreda Luna or any of the cast members for that matter, other than one small interview that I found with the actor Rafael Amaya, who played the psychiatrist, for Matt J. Horn on a blog post from November of 2011. And when he was asked about what it was like working with the cast and crew on set, he said, quote, "I only worked with Fernando Barreda Luna because my character is at the end of the film. We had excellent communication. He is a young director that listens to input. This is just the beginning of an excellent line of films to come." End quote. Sadly, I was unable to find any information regarding their overall budget or any box office earnings. The film received mixed reviews, with Rotten Tomatoes giving it a 53% and IMDb giving it an even 5-10 split right down the middle. Fans praised the film's eerie environment, its curated suspenseful moments, Spanish-centered writing/cultural perspective, the slight ending twist, and dark undertones, while detractors of the film point out its poor time management, unnecessary extended scenes, unsubstantial and unfulfilling story, and just simply not living up to its potential. Many have pointed out similarities with the Blair Witch Project, which is an American found footage horror film. Its cast is made up of Cristian Valencia, Clara Moraleda, Chus Pereiro, Sergi Martin, Javi Dos, Jose Masegosa, and Rafael Amaya. I typically include fun facts in all of my reviews, but I was unable to find any fun facts. This was a very straight to the point film. There's not a whole lot known about it, and like I said, there were no interviews other than Rafael Amaya's that I could find. Fernando Barreda Luna just appears to be a, I wouldn't say secretive, but he is just someone that's under the radar, and I was unable to find anything about all the other cast members or the making of the film. So, unfortunately, I don't have anything for this episode. For those who are new to Gore and Grapes, I do like to provide some context with all of my horror film reviews by talking and expanding on topics that stand out to me in the film in particular that I'm watching. And I believe that having some context with or paired with my film review helps to put a number to it and just adds a little bit more than just your typical pros and cons. So, one of the themes, or some of the themes that I would like to discuss today, is regarding urban legends in rural areas in particular. Other Latinos who are listening to this episode can relate to hearing stories from Mexico, witches, el diablo, ghosts, and all kinds of spooky mishappenings in small towns from where parents or families are from. And to outsiders, this might be quite strange. I think that it's hard for other people from outside or from the outside to be able to relate or understand where any of these things come from. And so, for us, it may be just something we grow up on, but we're not the only ones who experience this. Other cultures around the world experience the same phenomenon. And one of the main themes about this topic is that a lot of these stories come from small or rural towns. And this one is no different, like the story of Melinda in the Labyrinth, which happens to take place in the countryside and in Sitges. While I won't go into detail about what is an urban legend necessarily, I do think that it is important to define what it is, and I have two different definitions for what an urban legend is. And one is by Merriam-Webster, which is described as, quote, an often lurid story of anecdote that is based on hearsay and widely circulated as true, end quote. And by Britannica as, quote, a story about an unusual or humorous event that many people believe to be true, but that is not true, end quote. The Britannica also offers a great summary of what makes up an urban legend, describing that they occur in cultures worldwide with differences in local knowledge and cultural mores spread through word of mouth, though now are mainly being shared online, as we very well know by now, told for humor or shock value, and also reflecting anxieties and beliefs in modern society. A common theme of urban legends is geography or location. As we have just stated, they are typically coming from small towns, rural areas, off-the-grid places. And these are typically where you would find some strange, macabre tales. And this can be due to many different reasons, such as isolation from society, lack of resources, religious influence, gossip, and perhaps even just lack of entertainment. While Dr. Andrew Joseph Pagoda's article titled, quote, The Myth of the Small Town does not explore small towns as it relates to urban legends, I do appreciate his stance on defining the cultural angle of the small town. He ends the article by saying, quote, historical memory and contemporary memory conceives the small town to be a safe, comfortable place free of the crime and anonymity and chain stores of the city, but it is actually the city that holds truer to this ideal. Small towns, in ways, become the place with the highest degree of anonymity, because with the implicitly required conformity, no one really knows anyone, and freedoms of expression are frowned upon. The small town narrative remains true, however, for those who believe in it, and for many of those who live long enough to live in a small town, because it provides reassurance and stability to deeply held worldviews, end quote. Another great article that expands on these themes as it relates to horror is Nerdist's Why Are Small Towns the Perfect Sinister Setting for Horror, written by Ty Gooden. Tragedy is often at the core of urban legends, such as gruesome accidents, murder, suicide, etc. In Atrocious, tragedy upon a little girl is what gave birth to the story in the small town of Sitges, which is about 35 kilometers or 21 miles southwest of Barcelona and is home to the famous Sitges Film Festival. If there are any fest organizers listening to this, if you need a redheaded horror movie review podcast host at the fest, please. My DMs are spread wide open. We don't know much beyond the event and the supposed haunting. It is quite brief, but in the manner that it was told and presented is authentic, I would say, and quite relatable. Going off of not knowing much beyond the event is usually how it goes with some of these stories, as there is not a lot of context or follow-up unless someone dares to find that out for themselves, as we've seen in countless horror movies by now. Urban legends are generally accepted as true, though they are usually not. Carl Bell's article on Big Think, From Victorian Demons to the Beijing Night Bus, Why We Tell Each Other Urban Legends, describes how not only 19th century Britain used folklore as a means to adjust to living in the city, but how it was generally accepted as fact, despite the lack of evidence to support these claims. In Victorian London, this unease helped stoke tales about Spring-Heeled Jack, a supposedly clawed, fire-breathing demon or ghost that started to terrorize villages at the fringe of the capital in 1837. Widely publicized in the Victorian press, his exploits were said to have resulted in some people fearing to go out into the streets after dark. This mysterious figure thrived on rumor. A reporter for a London paper, the Morning Herald, noted on 10 January 1838 that, although the stories were in everybody's mouth, no person who had actually seen the ghost could be found. When he located named victims, they immediately denied all knowledge of it, but directed him to other persons whom they had heard had been ill-treated, but with them he met with no better success. The main characters in the film, Christian and Julie, are hosts of paranormal investigation show where they investigate urban legends to see if they are true. Once again, beyond that, there is nothing else that we know of the legend, and we also know nothing about the show or the nature of any other cases that they have previously investigated. This leads me to believe that they are in pursuit of the truth despite the possibility of a story to be completely false. The use of video cameras and recording 24/7 could imply that this is all just for show's sake, or just in case that they do happen to catch a glimpse of something abnormal to support said story. I do think that there is some irony in the nature of the film Atrocious. The lengths that Christian and Julie go to investigate this urban legend and how they end up meeting their fate in such a gruesome manner. It's as if Atrocious is the urban legend or the cautionary tale for us to take in. Another theme that I find to be particularly interesting and is also worth talking about due to its massive influence over this movie is the symbolism of mazes and labyrinths. Mazes and labyrinths are not interchangeable terms, but to put it simply, a labyrinth is a singular path that you follow that eventually brings you back to where you started, whereas mazes have branching paths and dead ends to challenge you to find your way out. It is said that the Western's understanding of labyrinths came from the story of Theseus and the Minotaur. The story goes that after the Queen of Crete gave birth to the monster, the Minotaur, King Minos commissioned Daedalus to create the elaborate but confusing structure to contain the Minotaur, who was eventually killed by Theseus. According to Culture Decanted's article titled The Psychology of the Maze as a Modern Symbol, posted in July 2014, they say that the labyrinth is, quote, one of the oldest symbols of humanity, probably dating back to 2500 BCE and most likely even older. It is also a motif that we find across many cultures and continents. As a symbol that evokes Carl Jung's collective unconsciousness, as we find the same symbol speaking to similar meaning across different discontiguous cultures and unrelated time periods, end quote. I highly recommend that you take some time to read this article, as there was just so much to learn about the different kinds of labyrinths, its cultural significance, and just labyrinths in pop culture, which I also thought was crazy and a thing in itself. The article does briefly mention the horror film series Saw and its take on the subject. The overarching themes here in Labyrinths and Mazes are thought provoking, challenging, complex, and also transformational. You see this in literature such as the best piece of literature, in my opinion, which is Dante's Inferno. So if you don't know me by now, this is something that I am very well versed in and can talk anyone's ear off about this. But for those of you who don't know what Dante's Inferno is, it details the story of the pilgrim Dante and his journey through the underworld as led by his Roman poet guide, Virgil, descending into the labyrinth of the nine circles of hell, to put it simply. This was a topic that I found to be very interesting. This one also stood out to me, not right away, especially where this theme was placed in the movie. And that would be postpartum depression and schizophrenia, and also how this kind of ties into the symbolism of finding tapes in the basement. I do want to mention as well before we move forward that this could be a very sensitive topic out there. So if you are someone who's sensitive to these subjects, I highly suggest that you exit out of the episode and come back another time. According to the Mayo Clinic on postpartum depression, quote, most new moms experience postpartum baby blues after childbirth, which commonly include mood swings, crying spells, anxiety, and difficulty sleeping. Baby blues usually begin within the first 2 to 3 days after delivery and may last for up to 2 weeks. But some new moms experience a more severe and long-lasting form of depression known as postpartum depression. Sometimes it's called peripartum depression because it can start during pregnancy and continue after childbirth. Rarely, an extreme mood disorder called postpartum psychosis also may develop after childbirth. End quote. I didn't know about postpartum psychosis until much later, and I was also intrigued after watching the film and how you see it manifest itself. According to the NHS, postpartum psychosis is also known as puerperal psychosis or postnatal psychosis. It appears that symptoms usually start right away within the first 2 weeks after giving birth, and even more rarely develop several weeks after the baby has been born. Symptoms include hallucinations, delusions, derealization, insomnia, mania, low moods, mixture of moods, and confusion. While reading on this subject, every article that I happened to read had a warning somewhere that people who go through postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis usually have a higher risk of harming themselves, dying by suicide, or harming others, but more importantly, their children, sadly. This is considered a medical emergency as it is a serious condition, so it is important that they receive medical attention right away. Knowing all of this is very important in how we try to understand the mom in the film. The mom is quite unassuming throughout the film and tends to shy away from the camera, but the few times we see her, she appears to be emotionally unavailable or in her own world. On the surface, she may just be keeping it together or trying the best that she can, as she is a mother and they have so much on their plates. But usually underneath all of that, there may be more than what we are able to see. And that leads me to believe that there may be some significance in finding the tapes in the basement in conjunction with the postpartum depression. In my opinion, I believe it was definitely intentional that the tapes were found in a basement, where if you zoom out and think about the role of a basement, it's at the very bottom of the house's foundation, where typically it is used as storage, where you throw things around, and a lot of these things are often forgotten for long periods of time. You can think throwing away your Christmas decorations and, bins upon bins or garbage, things that you think you'll need for later. Knowing all of that, you also in the film find that there are some classic horror films like Godzilla, Psycho, and Peeping Tom. So I believe that all of this was quite intentional. You could have found family VHS tapes, or, I suppose you can't really find anything new in a vacation home, right? But I mean, I do think that there is something to be said about finding old school horror movies in a basement. And for a family that has a vacation home, perhaps they don't travel there quite often. But if they do happen to go at least like once a year during the summer type thing, I don't know how this was all entirely new to them. If this is a home that they do tend to visit one or two times throughout the year. But needless to say, I do think that there is some symbolism and meaning behind all of it. With that in mind, they were already setting the tone for the events that happened or stayed in the past, however you see that. On a deeper level, this may symbolize the role of the subconscious as described by Sigmund Freud, who later changed the term to be the unconscious. After making this change, he stated, quote, "If someone talks of subconsciousness, I cannot tell whether he means the term topographically to indicate something lying in the mind beneath the consciousness, or qualitatively to indicate another consciousness, a subterranean one, as it were. He is probably not clear about any of it. The only trustworthy antithesis is between conscious and unconscious." End quote. In short, the subconscious is the part of the mind that is not currently in focus. For example, driving the same route every day to go to work, brushing your teeth in the mornings, or your body's reaction to loud noises. Dreams are the most commonly known reflections of your subconscious. This ancient and forgotten basement can simply be just that, an old forgotten basement, or may possibly reflect the subconscious of Christian and Julie's mother. Before we begin, I'd like to take another sip of my de-alcoholized wine. Not that I'm shitting on de-alcoholized wine, but this isn't what I normally drink. But I mean, again, still good. I'm not complaining. And now we can proceed with my pros and my cons of the film. My first pro is the environment and the Spanish influence. One thing that seemed to have attracted viewers to the film is its Spanish influence. In my opinion, after films like The Blair Witch Project and Grave Encounters, which are both American films, audiences around the world had gotten a taste of what American influence looks like over the found footage genre. Atrocious seemed to have piqued the interest of viewers, especially because it took place in a European country. By the time the film came out, Wreck, the famous found footage horror film, had just been out a few years prior, and I think that most people who have seen it had left with a good impression of the Spanish overtones. And when you narrow it down to the location and overall setting of the story, I believe it is a big bonus for the film here. You have an old but livable house in the Spanish countryside that is only visited less than a handful of times in a year, with the creepy labyrinth in the back. And I think that for American audiences, or from an American perspective, this can be very intriguing and eerie. I think they did this justice by providing a short transition at the beginning of the film from busy city life to the quiet countryside. The attic where Christian and Julie sleep in is incredibly haunting, and the concerning condition of the attic alone is creepy, but the view you get of the labyrinth from there is even more chilling. Not to mention that the basement scenes at the ending as well. It was certainly their mission to paint a vivid, eerie picture, which is perhaps the strongest point of the film, and it is absolutely memorable when you take a step back to recall the film. My next pro is regarding its tense moments. Admittedly, there are not many of these moments, but the one that sticks out to me the most is the one towards the end. And without spoiling too much, the lead up to the end is what I personally believe to be not only the scariest part of the film, but most certainly the most anxiety inducing part. It's difficult to produce or provoke these feelings, especially consistently, but the few moments in the film are memorable and worthy of discussion. I also personally tend to prefer more of these tense moments than jump scares, just because they tend to feel more authentic and the anticipation for relief is conflicting in itself. My next pro is regarding authentic dialogue and acting, and these don't always go hand in hand, but they certainly do with Atrocious. And I also think that it's another strong point of the film, in my personal opinion. And this isn't exclusively or exclusive to found footage in particular, but I have felt that the acting and the dialogue here in the film was just a solid A plus. It was fantastic, and I think that this goes for everyone in the cast. I may have stated before that the found footage genre often faces additional pressure for more believable performances to sell the idea that the story is real. It certainly felt that you were watching something real, something that you came across that you weren't supposed to see. And this definitely was an experience in itself. And I also believe that the dialogue and the interactions between the characters were not just believable, but it just felt like you were watching them in real time. I also felt that a big strong point or the strong suit of this acting and the dialogue is the casual Spanish slang or its twang, however you want to say it. And I thought that it was a great way to enhance the casual nature of their interactions. And even in the more urgent situations, you do get to catch a glimpse of all of that. Again, just aiding in that authenticity. Overall, I thought that the acting and the dialogue were seamless. My next pro also happens to be my last, and that would be the themes, which I find to be oddly mixed, especially when you mix something like an urban legend and postpartum depression. But I do find that it worked out here. And on the note of postpartum depression, it is a rare topic to discuss in the world of horror. I think this is the only film that I can think of that has, I mean, we've seen pregnancies and childbirth in horror movies, but I've never personally seen postpartum depression in a horror movie. So certainly a rare one. If you've seen one, I suppose let me know. I do want to know. But a rare one, but it was here, and I thought it was a refreshing topic to see in a horror film. And I did think that it was a curveball as well, because you don't really, without spoiling too much, you don't really get much about it until the very end. I would have liked to see this topic expanded or presented differently, but I do think that nonetheless it is appreciated. I also believe that this is a very original topic or idea that is refreshing in the film and in the horror realm as a whole. All in all, the themes that we have so far discussed are original, and they do provide a lot of context to the story rather just simplifying it to ghost hunting. And so the next thing to really discuss are my cons, and I left this one out in my script, and the reason being is that the only thing that I have written down is that it's everything that people have complained about or everything that people have criticized about the film is what my con is as well. And in particular, it's just not living up to its potential. There were the theme or the scene that stands out to me the most is the scene in the middle towards the end where they're in the labyrinth, they're running around and they're recording, and this is like 20 minutes. It's unnecessarily long, and that was everybody's major, excuse me, that is everybody's biggest complaint, and I agree with it as well. You get lost within that scene and you forget what is going on or how this ties into anything. And before you know it, you just lose all this time and it tries to find its way back. Um, this could have easily been simplified. I don't think that it needed all that much, or we needed all that much footage, but regardless, apart from that, I felt that the poor time management was also a big one, and I am quite sad to see that this film had so much potential, and despite all the good things that we have just mentioned, there's really not, it's not a saving grace, and that's just very sad to see that that's all that it is. My overall rating for Atrocious is a 5.5 out of 10. I feel that I've been a little generous with my rating, and that's because, again, this was a movie that I had watched years ago while I was in college, and so it does hold a special place in my heart. But am I feel that I'm being reasonable with my rating at the same time because, with all the aforementioned, I don't think it can go any higher than that. I don't think it's an amazing horror film or really adds anything to the found footage genre. Atrocious is a film that stands on its own. It has some intriguing themes. It provides a new landscape in the world of found footage horror, and it does have superb acting. With a haunted story supported by ancient symbolism that took place in the beautiful Spanish countryside, the film was set up for success, but unfortunately, these traits are insufficient in filling the gaps of lengthy, dull scenes or little to no jump scares. And I do also believe that the lack of engagement of the viewer is the film's demise, which is arguably one of the most important aspects of filmmaking in the horror genre. The nail in the coffin for Atrocious is its failure in time management. The film starts, and before you know it, the film abruptly ends, leaving the audience unfulfilled and starved for more. A film with a third of its time wasted on unnecessary footage, one can't help but feel production struggle to occupy its time rather than using this as an opportunity to further expand on the ideas that they have previously presented and should be proud of. And what could have been a memorable film, it's seen as a film with little to no substance. Perhaps with more time, less filler, more context, and expansion of the aforementioned themes, the film could have earned a higher spot in moviegoers' lists and perhaps even in the found footage genre as a whole. As a result, it is a film that will forever sit on its potential and is sidelined among others, despite its leg up by Bloody Disgusting. However, it is worth remembering that this is Fernando Barredaluna's directorial debut, and for what it is not inherently terrible, my personal opinion. While it's not recommendable by half of the audience, I am part of the half that does, but I caution those inclined to watch to be cautious. It is also worth mentioning that there is a scene regarding the death of an animal. I watched Atrocious on YouTube, but it is available on other streaming platforms. And with that, the tale, like all things mortal, has come to an end. I do hope that you found tonight's episode to be especially dreadful, but I do want to know, what do you think? Do you agree with my review? Do you not? Have you seen it? Do you plan on watching it? I want to know all of it. Don't ghost me, and make sure that you subscribe and that you follow Gore and Grapes on all socials, which are linked right down at the bottom. Thank you very much for watching and for listening, and I will see you very soon. Goodbye.